Every family has its secrets, but mine began with a name that didn't exist. Meredith. The caretaker my parents insisted was with my grandmother, it turned out. She was never real. Why would they conjure such a phantom? What were they hiding? And how far were they willing to go to keep it buried? I never imagined that from the moment I dialed that strange number, my entire world would crumble. I'm Alex Fisher, 28, an Army medic. 14 months in a war zone teaches you to embrace chaos, to keep a clear head when everything around you is exploding. But what greeted me upon my return to Pennsylvania, the home where I grew up, was an absolute silence. I hadn't announced my arrival, wanting to surprise my parents. The door was locked. No one answered. I used the spare key hidden under the flower pot. A key I hadn't touched in years. The house was cold. No TV humming. No smell of food. Just a heavy, suffocating silence. And then, I smelled it. A sour, acrid odor of neglect. It led me upstairs, to my grandmother's room. My grandmother, Eleanor, lay there, on the disheveled bed. The medic in me screamed, before the grandson could even process. Her skin was as dry as parchment, her lips cracked, her breathing shallow and weak. She was barely conscious. This wasn't an elderly person sleeping. This was someone dying. I didn't panic. Adrenaline surged, but it was cold and focused. I knelt, 2 fingers on her carotid artery. A pulse. Weak, but there. "Grandma, it's Alex. I'm home." Her eyelids fluttered, but wouldn't open. I pulled out my phone. One hand dialing 911, the other still holding her pulse. 911. "What's your emergency?" "I'm Alex Fisher, an Army medic. I need an ambulance immediately at." I rattled off the address clearly. Elderly female patient. Signs of severe dehydration, weakness, almost unresponsive. In the emergency room, the doctor's words hammered into the silence like blows. Acute renal failure, severe neglect, very poor prognosis. I nodded, absorbing the information like a battlefield report. Emotions would come later. Now was the time for action. I called my parents. My mother answered on the second ring, her voice bright, as if in the middle of a party. "Alex, darling, how are you? When are you coming home?" "Grandma's in the ER." I cut straight to the point. "She's in bad shape. The doctors say it's due to neglect." The silence on the other end lasted exactly 1 second. Then my mother shrieked, a perfect cry of shock and horror. What? You're home? Oh my God. Little Meredith, that girl. I paid her for an entire month to take care of Grandma. How dare she? I'm calling her right now. Your father and I will take the first flight home, darling. Don't worry, we're on our way. She hung up. Meredith. A name. An explanation. I sat on the hard plastic chair in the waiting room. The smell of antiseptic stung my nose. I opened Facebook, perhaps looking for something familiar. My mother's profile was the first to appear, a photo posted 4 hours ago. My parents, tanned, beaming on a beach in Cabo. Golden sun, blue sea, 2 cocktails in their hands. The caption, a much-needed vacation to de-stress from everything at home. Number, living our best life. Number, paradise. I looked at the photo, at their smiles, replayed my mother's perfect shriek in my head. I locked my phone. My breathing was steady. My hands didn't shake. Anger began to form, not a hot flame, but a block of ice. A single question materialized in my mind, sharp as a scalpel. How could they be so happy while entrusting her to someone so irresponsible? The first few days in the hospital blurred into an endless shift. Grandmother Eleanor had passed the immediate crisis. but the doctor's words weighed like stones on my chest. Stage 4. Pancreatic cancer. Her records showed my parents had been informed weeks ago. They knew. They knew perfectly well, and still left her alone with a stranger. I sat by her bed, watching her grow thinner, IV tubes in her arm. She still held my hand weakly, her eyelids only fluttering open occasionally. I saw the truth clearly. She wasn't forgotten. She was deliberately abandoned. Every day, my mother called, her voice still full of feigned worry, but she still hadn't returned. And every day, I asked the same question, my voice growing more impatient. Mom, I need Meredith's number. I have to talk to her. At first, there were promises. Oh, I'm so sorry, darling. I'm so flustered. I'll find it right now. But then came the excuses. I don't know where I put my old phone. Your father's helping me look. Don't worry. Just stay with Grandma. And your father and I will. I hung up before she could ramble on further. I didn't have time to wait. A real caretaker would surely leave a trace. I searched her room. Small drawers. The bedside table. The desk where her old landline phone still Saturday. And then I saw it. A thin notebook. Its pages yellowed with dust and time. I flipped through it quickly. No, Meredith. Only a clear entry. Sarah, caregiver, along with a phone number. My heart didn't beat faster. On the contrary, it seemed to slow, everything becoming frighteningly clear. I dialed the number. Hello? A woman's voice answered. I'm Alex, Eleanor Fisher's grandson. A pause, then a choked sob. Oh my goodness. Alex, is she all right? I've been so worried. She's in the hospital, I replied, keeping my voice even. I was told her caregiver was named Meredith. Meredith? The confusion in her voice was unmistakable. No, there's no one named Meredith. It's just me, Sarah. But your parents let me go 2 weeks ago. They said the family would take care of her themselves. I stood frozen in the room. I remained silent, letting her words sink in. The family would take care of her themselves. No Meredith, just a fabricated name. A perfect excuse for the phone calls, for the feigned shock. Thank you, Sarah, I said, my voice icy. This isn't your fault at all. I hung up but still stood there, phone in hand. My grandmother's room suddenly felt suffocating. The lie was no longer a suspicion. It was a truth. As tangible as the bed she should have been in. They didn't just abandon her. They orchestrated a play, with a character who didn't even exist. I turned and walked downstairs to my grandfather's study. The anger now had a clear target. I didn't need an explanation anymore. I needed a weapon. I opened the drawer of his oak desk, flipping through old papers, and I found it. Tucked inside a leather-bound notebook. A business card. Simple and crisp. George Thompson, attorney. I vaguely remembered him as a longtime friend of my grandfather's, who handled most of the family's legal affairs. Now, I needed him more than ever. I immediately called the number on the card. An old but firm man's voice answered. Thompson here. I'm Alex Fisher, Eleanor's grandson, and Charles Fisher's grandson. He paused for a few seconds, then said slowly, I remember you. Your voice sounds just like young Charles. What happened? I told him concisely, without embellishment, just the facts. Her condition, Meredith's non-existence, Sarah's testimony. I heard him sigh on the other end. Then his voice deepened. This is a terrible situation, Alex, he said, his voice grave and resolute. Very terrible. This isn't negligence. This is intentional. Can I come see you first thing tomorrow morning? The next day, I sat in George Thompson's office. The place smelled of old paper, polished wood, and gravitas. Everything was neat, solid, just like the man sitting opposite me. Thompson had keen eyes behind his tortoiseshell glasses. "What do I need to do to protect Grandma?" I asked directly. "The first thing," he said. "We need to file for emergency guardianship. The court needs to see that Eleanor is in danger and needs a competent protector immediately. You, as a direct relative and the one who discovered the situation, are the #1 candidate." He explained the process. The necessary paperwork. I nodded. The goal was clear. I would gain legal custody of my grandmother. She would never again depend on my parents' pity or deceit. 2 days later, Mr. Thompson called me to his office again. This time, his expression was even more serious. "Alex," he began as soon as I sat down. During the paperwork review, I looked over Charles's will again. "The situation is more complicated than we thought." He pushed a stack of documents across the wooden desk. "Your grandfather left his house and most of his assets directly to you. Not to his daughter, not to anyone else. Everything, from this house to a substantial investment, belongs to you upon Eleanor's passing." I looked at him, showing no emotion. I wasn't thinking about money. I was thinking about motive. He was worried, Thompson explained, as if reading my thoughts. "He was worried about your father's financial management. This will was drawn up to protect the family legacy and to protect you." I looked down at the documents. Everything suddenly became clearer than ever. The Cabo trip, the lies, the abandonment. It wasn't just carelessness. It was desperation. "So this is why," I said softly, almost to myself. "Precisely," Thompson affirmed. "This isn't just a custody battle. This is also a battle over assets. And your parents are losing. That makes them dangerous." I stood up. The cold feeling in my chest now hardened to steel. The mission was set. The opponent's motive had been exposed. Now it was time to act. My parents finally returned, a week after I found Grandma. They appeared at the hospital with the perfect grieving children facade. My mother, her skin still tanned from Cabo, rushed to embrace me. "Alex, darling, I'm so sorry. Everything got so messed up. I'm so sorry I didn't come home sooner. Oh God, how I worried about Grandma." I didn't push her away. I just looked directly into her eyes, listening to every word fall out like a rehearsed script. My father stood behind her, nodding gravely. "We tried to find that Meredith girl. She just vanished off the face of the earth. A scam artist. They were good actors, but I was no longer an audience member." Following Mr. Thompson's advice, I didn't show my hand immediately. Instead, I requested a formal meeting with the hospital social worker, who was managing Grandma's case. I said I wanted an update and to clarify care plans. We sat in a small windowless conference room. The air was stifling. The social worker, a woman named Linda, began. "Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Fisher, for coming. We need to clarify a few things regarding Eleanor's care." My mother started immediately, her voice trembling. "It's all our fault. We shouldn't have trusted that Meredith girl. We were swindled. Now we just want to bring Grandma home and take care of her ourselves." Linda nodded, taking notes. "Do you have any contact information for Miss Meredith?" "We tried calling," my father interjected, "but the number is no longer active. A professional scammer." The room fell silent. All eyes turned to me. I took a deep breath, keeping my voice calm. "Actually," I said, looking directly into my mother's eyes, "Grandma's caregiver wasn't named Meredith." The confidence on my mother's face wavered slightly. What are you talking about?" "Her name is Sarah Wells," I continued, my voice steady. I spoke to her. She said you let her go 2 weeks ago, right before your trip to Cabo, and you said that the family would take care of her themselves. A deathly silence enveloped the room. I could see the color drain from my mother's face. My father stiffened, his eyes narrowing menacingly. "What the hell are you saying?" my father roared, his calm facade shattering. "You believe a hired hand over your own parents? Look at what you've become after returning from the battlefield. You don't trust anyone anymore." He had fallen into the trap. "I don't need to trust anyone, sir," I replied, my voice cold as steel, still looking at the social worker. "I only trust the truth. And the truth is, there is no Meredith. The truth is you abandoned a terminally ill person alone to go on vacation. Enough." My father slammed the table. "This is a family matter. It has nothing to do with you." He pointed at Linda. Linda didn't flinch. She just calmly took notes. Aggressive reaction. Indirect admission. Personal attack, directed at me. My mother started to cry, but this time the tears looked cheap. "Alex, how could you? After everything your father and I have done for you, what have you done for Grandma?" I cut her off. "That's the important question." The conversation ended shortly after. They had exposed their true nature to an authority figure. As we walked into the hallway, my father grabbed my arm. "You'll regret this," he hissed, his voice laced with venom. "Who do you think you are? You won't get a single penny." I looked him straight in the eye. "Don't you get it yet?" I said softly. This was never about money. I turned and walked away, leaving them standing there, stunned by the truth that had just been exposed. The battle had officially begun. Not on a battlefield, but right here, and I had gained the first advantage. Immediately after the hospital confrontation, I went back to Thompson. If my parents thought this was a game, I would show them just how ruthless the real rules were. The day after the confrontation, Thompson officially filed for emergency guardianship with the court. Immediately, my parents hired their own lawyer, a slick-looking man with a smug smile. The legal battle had begun. My task was clear: strengthen the evidence. Sarah was the first card. Thompson didn't leave her alone. He sent a private investigator to work directly with her, ensuring her safety and legal guidance. A few days later, I held her sworn affidavit, detailed down to every timeline. When she cared for Grandma, when she was fired, and my parents' own words that the family would take care of her themselves. This was no longer a story. This was evidence. Thompson filed a request to retrieve my parents' credit and bank records. Next was the motive. My parents would try to paint a picture of dutiful children who fell on hard times. We had to prove the opposite. I thought of Aunt Patricia, my father's sister. Their relationship had been strained for a long time, also because of money. I called her. Initially, she was hesitant. "Alex, I don't want to get involved in this." "Aunt Patricia," I said, my voice firm. "This isn't just about me. This is about Grandma. They abandoned her to the brink of death. You know what kind of man Dad is." There was a long silence. Then, I heard her sigh. "All right, I'll help." Aunt Patricia didn't just provide testimony. She sent Thompson old text messages where my father had repeatedly asked her for money with outlandish reasons. She recounted conversations where my father had probed about how to access my grandparents' assets. Meanwhile, Thompson filed a request to retrieve my parents' credit and bank records. The results appeared coldly on paper. Tens of thousands of dollars in credit card debt, 2 high-interest personal loans, and their own home mortgage to the maximum. They were drowning. My grandmother wasn't just a burden to be discarded. She was a life raft they were trying to push underwater to keep themselves afloat. Their lawyer began to attack. They sent Thompson a letter, implying that I suffered from PTSD after my military service, that I was psychologically unstable, and trying to usurp the family's assets. "This is a dirty tactic," Thompson said over the phone. "But it could work." "They're wrong," I replied. "My discharge health records are completely clean. The military doesn't let psychologically unstable people return to the community. Just ask them to provide proof." Thompson chuckled softly. "Good. Very good, Alex." Our file grew thicker. Each piece of paper was a brick building a fortress around my grandmother, and also undeniable evidence to destroy their lies. Sarah's testimony, Aunt Patricia's history of debt, bank financial reports, detailed medical reports from the hospital, and finally, my grandfather's will. The case was ready. The first hearing was set for 2 weeks later. In the meantime, Eleanor began to have more lucid moments. One afternoon, she squeezed my hand, her dim eyes looking at me. "Alex," she whispered, her voice weak. Where are they?" I squeezed her hand gently. "They won't bother you anymore," I said. "I'm here. I'll take care of everything." She nodded, a single tear rolling down her emaciated cheek. "Your grandfather. He was right about you." My mission had never been clearer. On the day of the hearing, I wore my dress uniform, not to exert pressure, but to remind myself, and everyone in that room, of the oath of service and protection I had sworn. I sat next to Thompson, back straight, eyes forward. My parents sat at the opposite table, dressed formally, with grieving expressions. Their lawyer, a man named Klein, stood up, opening with a familiar tone, turning the victim into the perpetrator. "Your Honor, Alex Fisher is a serviceman who has just returned from the battlefield. He is suffering from severe psychological trauma, is prone to outbursts, and is unstable. He has been estranged from his family for years, never cared for Eleanor. And now, suddenly, he appears, demanding guardianship and a huge inheritance." I listened, unmoved. His words weren't meant for me to believe. They were meant to sow doubt. But Thompson was prepared. When he stood up, everything changed. "Your Honor," he began. The opposing side mentioned a caregiver named Meredith. "We would like to call our first witness, Miss Sarah Wells." As Sarah walked in, I saw my parents stiffen. Sarah, though trembling, answered each of Thompson's questions clearly. She recounted being fired, the lie about the family taking care of her themselves, and the complete fabrication of Meredith. Lawyer Klein tried to unsettle her, implying she was fired for poor performance and was now seeking revenge. But Sarah just looked directly at the judge. "I cared for Eleanor for 2 years. I loved her. I would never do that." Her words were sincere and credible. Next, Thompson presented the financial evidence. Numbers don't lie. Credit card statements, loan documents, mortgage papers. The picture of a couple drowning in debt emerged clearly. Their motive was no longer speculation. They couldn't afford a vacation, Thompson said. They were desperate. Finally, the decisive blow. Thompson presented my grandfather's will. "Your Honor, this was not the impulsive act of a greedy son. This is the continuation of a deceased man's wishes. Charles Fisher, Eleanor's husband, foresaw the nature of his own son. He drew up this will to protect his wife and his grandson." Lawyer Klein objected vehemently, but it was too late. Everything had been exposed. The judge, an older woman with a stern gaze, looked at my parents. "Mr. and Mrs. Fisher, the court has heard enough. Conflicting testimony, clear financial evidence, and a will showing pre-existing distrust." She paused for a moment, then delivered her ruling. "The court grants temporary guardianship to Alex Fisher, effective immediately. A full investigation will be conducted. Mr. and Mrs. Fisher are prohibited from contacting Eleanor without court permission. My parents' facade completely crumbled. My mother burst into sobs, but this time no one believed her. My father stared at me, his eyes filled with seething resentment. As the hearing ended, a man in civilian clothes approached us in the hallway. "Mr. Fisher? I'm Detective Miller from the District Attorney's Office. We will be taking over this case. There are signs of elder neglect and financial fraud. We will need your statement." I nodded. This was no longer just a civil lawsuit. This was a criminal case. I left the courthouse, feeling no joy from the victory, only a heavy sense of responsibility. The first battle was over, but the real war had just begun. The victory in court brought no sense of relief. It simply opened up another reality: responsibility. Now, I was solely responsible for my grandmother. My life narrowed to 4 walls: the hospital and my grandparents' empty house. A soldier's job is to follow orders and complete the mission. My new mission was to ensure Eleanor lived her final days in comfort and dignity. The criminal investigations continued, but that was for Detective Miller and Mr. Thompson. My job was to be with her. Cancer waits for no one. It gnawed at her every day. There were days she was lucid, and we talked about old memories. She told stories about my grandfather, about their youth. She never mentioned my parents. It was as if she had erased them from her life. There were bad days, too. Days when she was in pain, delirious. In those moments, I just sat by her side, held her hand, and whispered, "I'm here, Grandma. Everything's all right." I realized I couldn't do both. I couldn't be a soldier ready for deployment orders and a full-time caregiver. The decision came to me naturally, though it wasn't easy. I submitted my resignation from the Army. 10 years in the military. Everything I knew, everything I had become, I packed it all away and left it behind. The mission here was more important. A few months later, I found the best hospice facility in the area, a quiet place, with gardens and nurses who treated patients with respect, not pity. I moved her there, personally arranging her small room, placing old family photos on the bedside table, photos from before everything shattered. I spent most of my time there. I read to her the novels my grandfather used to love. I played old music. I was simply there, my presence a promise that she would never be left alone again. Meanwhile, my parents' case reached its conclusion. Faced with an insurmountable amount of evidence, they accepted a plea bargain to avoid trial. My father received an 18-month sentence for elder neglect and fraud. My mother, in a supposedly less serious role, received 12 months of probation and 3 years of supervised release. I heard the news from Mr. Thompson, feeling nothing. No triumph, no sadness, just an emptiness. They had written their own sentences long ago. One autumn afternoon, as the leaves outside the window were turning vibrant colors, Eleanor held my hand, her eyes clearer than they had been in weeks. "Alex," she said, her voice more distinct than I'd heard in a long time. "Your grandfather, he was right about you. Strong, kind. I learned from you, Grandma," I replied softly. She smiled weakly. "Promise me. Live a good life. Don't let this anger consume you." "I promise," I said. That was our last lucid conversation. A few weeks later, on a chilly winter morning, as I was reading her a poem, her breathing became shallower, then stopped. She passed away peacefully, in silence, with me by her side. The battle was over. She was free. And for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. Mission accomplished. Grandma Eleanor's funeral was attended by only a few people. Myself, Mr. Thompson, Aunt Patricia, and Sarah. No fake tears, no empty condolences, just quiet reverence for a woman who had lived a quiet life and departed in peace. Afterward, I returned to my grandparents' house. The silence now was no longer heavy or suffocating. It carried a sense of emptiness, but also a space to begin anew. I started to clean, not to erase, but to rearrange the fragments of memories. In my grandfather's study, while going through old notebooks, I found something I had never seen before. It wasn't a carefully sealed letter. It was his diary. On the last pages, written months before his death, he had written about me. He wrote about his pride when I joined the army. He wrote about his secret worries for my grandmother's future. And he wrote about my father. "I love my son," he wrote, "but I don't trust him. There is a hole in his soul that money can never fill. I can only hope that Alex, with his integrity, will be the guardian of this family's true legacy, not money, but honor." Reading those words, I felt a deep connection to the man I had always admired. The legacy he left me wasn't the assets in his will. That legacy was trust. My life gradually settled into a new rhythm. I didn't return to the military. Instead, I used my medic experience and started working part-time at a veterans clinic in town. There I met other soldiers, people also trying to find their place in civilian life. I listened to their stories, and sometimes I shared a part of my own. It was at that clinic that I met Emily. She was a therapist, specializing in helping veterans cope with invisible wounds. She had understanding eyes and rare patience. We started with conversations during breaks, then coffee after work. She didn't see me as a hero or a victim. She just saw me, Alex. Meanwhile, the house slowly changed. I repainted the walls, fixed the creaking porch, and replanted the rose bushes Grandma used to love. It was no longer a crime scene or a disputed inheritance. It gradually became my home. My parents were released from prison. I heard through Aunt Patricia that they had moved to Florida, starting a new life, telling a new story in which they were the victims. I didn't contact them. Forgiveness, if it came, didn't mean reopening healed wounds. One summer evening, as Emily and I sat on the porch, watching fireflies rise from the lawn, she asked me a simple question. "Have you found peace?" I looked at the house, thought about my grandparents, thought about everything that had happened. The icy anger that had once burned within me had melted away. In its place was a quiet acceptance. "I'm getting there," I replied. The true legacy my grandparents left wasn't the house or the numbers in a bank account. That legacy was the strength to do the right thing when it was hardest, the compassion to care for others, and the courage to build a new future from the shattered pieces of the past. My battle was over, and a new life was beginning.